button clicks. There we go. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Catholit Podcast. This is the second episode of 2 episodes this month. I'm releasing on the pro-life movement and the faith and the way that young people have involved themselves with the movement. My guests today are my friend Nick Rabideau and my friend Hailey Guth. Nick, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
All right. Hello, my name is Nick Rabideau. I am a junior, almost a senior at Texas A&M University down here in Corpus Christi. I'm a history major, and pro-life movement has always been a part of my life. So this is why Jordan asked me here.
Awesome. Hailey, go ahead.
Awesome. Hey, everybody. My name is Hailey Guth. I'm a sophomore at the University of Dallas, and that's how I know my good friend Germ. We were in a ministry class together. So I'm studying theology at UD. Just got back from my Rome semester, which was wonderful. And I'm an officer in the Crusaders for Life Club. I do street activism and have been active in that club for 2 years now, and I'll be the same officer this coming year. And I've been active in the pro-life movement for about 5 years now. Born and raised in an awesome Catholic pro-life family, and really involved in the movement for my whole life.
Thanks, guys. It is awesome to have you guys here. It's Nick and I are good friends since high school, but obviously since we go to different schools, we don't have the chance to sit down and talk very often, which is a shame because Nick is an awesome person. And Hailey, of course, has been abroad and then came back very promptly, quarantined, and was away from the Irving campus for most of the spring semester. So I didn't have a chance to interact with the lovely Hailey.
So the next,
so a bit of a word on how this podcast is set up. So I think, at least in my opinion, in my understanding of the Catholic faith, I think we can derive things from our experience with the Catholic faith informs our opinions about the Catholic faith and how it relates to the world. And as a result, our opinions inform the way that we suggest people to move forward in the world. So those are the three kind of sections that I have set out for this podcast. So starting off, I think the most basic question I can really ask is, how long have you been involved in the pro-life movement, and what capacity have you been involved in? Nick, let's start with you.
All right. I've been pro-life pretty much my whole life, but the movement itself I've really been active in it probably the last 2 years. Last year, I was approached by a campus minister here and was asked, I know you're pro-life. I know this is a mission that you want to do. Would you be interested in starting a group? And of course, I couldn't turn that down. So I started working at that. I started communicating different resources here in Corpus Christi. One that I work with pretty regularly is the Corpus Christi Pregnancy Center of the Coastal Bend. They are one of the most wonderful organizations that any place can ever have. They are a Christ-driven organization. They offer so many classes and services for the mothers, for the children, for the fathers, that just, it's amazing to see what they can do. With that, I was also a part of the William Wilberforce Fellowship this semester for Students for Life of America. Through that, I met people all across the country, from California, Oregon, Wisconsin. It was amazing to meet so many people. We had a kickoff weekend in Washington, D.C., where at that point, I had my first experience of sidewalk counseling for Planned Parenthood. We don't have Planned Parenthoods or any abortion facility in Corpus Christi, so I don't have that opportunity to do that regularly. But doing that in Washington, D.C. with such great people was really amazing. Throughout this whole year, we had calls every couple of weeks. We were tasked with a project. That project is probably the most significant moment in my experience so far. With this whole pandemic outbreak thing, we're forced to do everything online. I was working with the pregnancy center, and we were planning a banquet, their annual banquet type of thing. And with that going online, we were told, this is what we can do. This is how we're going to do it. And this is how it's going to work. We were like, okay, that works. For this banquet, we had David Beeright, the former president of 40 Days for Life, and Cal Thomas, who is a pro-life advocate and speaker, and other leaders like that, as our keynote speakers and everything. The virtual banquet went for about an hour. Within that hour, we received over $50,000 in donations. Within
That's
the
impressive.
first week, we had $346,000, and that it's truly amazing because last year the in-person banquet only capped over $300,000. So to expand their donation range, to do all this stuff virtually is something that God is pushing us to do and opening up so many more doors that we can do in the future. So that'd be my experience mainly with the pro-life movement.
Wow, yeah, that's really impressive. Especially like I would imagine it would be kind of difficult to put in a virtual banquet. There's a lot more like limitations and things like that. So it's like it's amazing that surpassed like the normal kind of thing. Yeah, Hailey, what about you? Let's hear about your stories.
Yeah, I was raised in a wonderful pro-life Catholic family, kind of as pro-life as you can get. My dad was an OBGYN, and my mom is a psychologist and works at a local pregnancy center. So I've been raised in conservative pro-life circles, went to private Catholic school, and have always valued life at all ages, which is a gift to be raised in such a way. Where life is always seen as a gift and life is always precious no matter what. But it wasn't really until my sophomore year of high school that I learned what abortion was and that I realized that I had been ignorant of what was happening and that that's when I became convicted that I had to do something. I couldn't remain silent anymore. It kind of started when my government class had a debate about abortion, and it was myself against the rest of my class, including my teacher. And I had never heard those arguments that they gave for abortion. I had never heard someone say that a child was a burden or a parasite or unwanted. That those thoughts had never crossed my mind. I didn't know that my best friends in high school believed that a woman's right to her own body trumped a child's right to his own life. That blew my mind, and I left that debate in tears and convicted that I have to do something. I had no words to say. I had no idea how to articulate a pro-life argument. So I was embarrassed and just so enraged but mostly just convicted with compassion for my peers because I recognized that they saw the world in such a sad way and they didn't see the gift that every life was. Luckily for me, that same exact month was when my mom started volunteering at the pregnancy center, and my older sister, who also attended the same high school, decided to start a pro-life club. So she is my greatest inspiration, and so I joined her in starting that club. I was terrified because, as you can imagine, by my peers in that abortion debate, I was terrified of persecution. I thought I would lose all my friends, which I ended up doing. Many of my friends no longer wanted to associate with me because I was the crazy pro-life girl.
Well-founded fears.
Yeah. But so we started this club together, and I got to be president for the next 2 years. After my sister graduated, I took it on, and we went on the National March for Life together. And then I attended a summer camp called Pulse, led by Louisiana Right to Life. And that's really where I was given the vocabulary, the dialogue skills, and the training, and the experiences. We got to go table at college campuses and pray outside abortion clinics. And that's where I received the words to speak about abortion and to really engage my campus in conversations. And the conviction and the courage to be this president of my high school club. So that's kind of how I got started. I then started volunteering as a babysitter at the pregnancy center. And I worked for Louisiana Right to Life for a few years, traveling around the state to give talks at their camps and retreats. And now, as a Crusaders for Life member and officer, I've been working for the UD Club and some local organizations in Dallas in the pro-life movement. So,
yeah, y'all, and I'm blown away, man. Like I love how involved y'all have been and just how open you guys are in sharing this kind of experience. It's a great to hear. I love hearing about it. So I think the next question I kind of wanted to tie this back to is I've kind of envision this podcast as a bit of a conduit for young Catholics to talk to other young Catholics about issues in their faith. And I think one of the prevalent ones right now is abortion, I guess, because at least to us, of course, as Catholics, the right to life is a right that's given by God, and that it should be protected from the beginning of life to the natural end of life. It's not for us to kind of mess with, and so. But I think we might lose sight of it that some people that are in our church might not see things the same way and might have valid kind of ways of looking for the truth, but have reached the wrong conclusions about it. So I think the next question I really wanted to ask about your experience is how being pro-life has impacted your faith. How does it connect to it? Whichever one of you guys has an answer, y'all can start.
Yeah, I'll take it first. I love that question. So being pro-life has everything to do with my faith, has enhanced my faith. First and foremost, because I see life as a gift from God, a gift to be received and a gift to be given back to Him. So if everything that I have, everything that I do, every part of who Hailey is given by God and meant to be given back to Him, that means first I'm His child. I'm His beloved child who was made in His image and His likeness, and who's been given this great mission that, I can refuse. I can sit idly by. I can, watch while my brothers and sisters suffer. That's completely within my free will. Or I can choose to recognize, wow, this life is a gift and it's a joy to respond in love. And so it's this invitation to love radically and to give of myself and to sacrifice and to challenge other Christians, other people to do the same. Just to remind us what our faith truly calls us to. It's not a cakewalk. It's not easy. Christ says, pick up your cross and follow me. And so I think to be pro-life is to love radically, to give of yourself and to recognize, wow, I've been given this identity as God's child, and the world has forgotten that, and I have a duty to remind the world of that, their core identity as his children, his beloved children. So if anything, being active in the pro-life movement has just enriched my faith, and I only do it because Christ, because Christ, period. Just for Him and for Him. Yeah.
Nick, let's hear from you, man.
I mean, she hits it right on the T there. But for me, really, this movement is so much more than a Christ issue or an our church issue or a Catholic issue. Being at a public campus, a public university and everything like this, not everyone wants to hear that. So I feel that God is using me as a tool to express the need for pro-life movement, the need for all these pregnancy resource centers through a different way. Mm-hmm. Yes, Christ is going to back me up in every step of the way I do. And yes, the church is always going to back me up, but not everyone wants to hear that because not everyone's Catholic, which is hard for me because I can easily say, well, God made you this way, God made you that, whatever, but they're going to come back and say, well, I don't believe in God. So then I have to use my tools, my resources that God is giving me to try and answer that back with another non-religious answer.
Yeah. I think, absolutely. I think, at least in my own involvement in the pro-life movement to this point, has just been kind of attending events and just making up the numbers. I think I'm a very loyal attendee to the Crusaders for Life Club events on campus. But it does make a difference. I have to agree with you guys. It's just hearing about the value of life constantly means that as a result, your own valuation of your life and those of others increases because you hear about it more, and that idea develops and it becomes a more I'm looking for the word. It becomes a solid foundation on which you can base your life and the way that you live it. So it's great to hear that from you guys. I love hearing that. Finally, lastly, in this kind of little section we have, I want to hear one significant moment in your recent experience, at least. I think I'm going to limit this to kind of the involvement that you've had on campus, because I think maybe it's a little bit easier to kind of think of a little specific instance. One significant moment in your experience being like kind of involved in the pro-life movement and in college, I guess. Yeah.
I'll start this one. Kind of what Hailey was saying when she was in her government class with the debate. The semester before I got my organization started, I was in an ethics class, and I was quiet throughout the whole class because I knew 1 week would be abortion week, and I was quiet through the whole class. I wasn't going to talk. I wasn't going to say anything until this week happened. And this week happened, and my professor asked, "Is abortion ever okay?" I was the first person to raise my hand, and I said no. And everyone in the class turned and looked at me. One, a guy speaking on this. Two, a white guy speaking on this. Like, it blew their mind that I was the first person to say anything. And my professor was like, well, what do you mean? And I explained myself the best in my ability I could at that time. And the dirty looks I got and everything like this. And then it wasn't until the end of that week when my professor called on someone else, and he asked her, well, in the instance of rape, do you think abortion should be allowed? And the girl looked over at me and said, "I'm with that guy." She didn't know my name, which is fine. Like, no one knows my name. But when she was able to speak up, and she knew I had her back, and she had the courage to speak up and say, "My best friend was conceived in rape," and I was like, that's what I need. That's what this campus needs. It's truly amazing to see when other people step up because of what you're doing and the faith you're putting forward, even if you're doing it without speaking of Christ, but just stepping up and doing it. That's what this is all about.
Yeah, wow, that's an awesome story. I love that. And I'm sure somebody knew your name in that class.
You'd be surprised. I'm very quiet in my classes.
All right, I'll leave you to it. I'm sure you know your classes better than I do. Hailey, why don't you go ahead? Let's hear from you.
Yeah. So part of my role as street activism officer, I organize trips off campus and tabling events on our campus. So this was one of the trips to UT at Denton. I took a group of students to table with their pro-life club, and Justice for All is a local organization that will come and help you with your tabling events. So they had this JFA display on the mall of their campus, and there were students coming and going, and had a few short conversations with students. And then I noticed this guy walk up to this display, and he had a really curious look on his face. I could tell he was thinking, and I just approached him and said hello and introduced myself, and we began chatting, and he shared his thoughts on the display with me, and the first thing out of his mouth was, "Well, I'm sure we disagree on pretty much everything because I'm pro-choice and I'm atheist." And I just smiled and said, "Well, hi, I'm Hailey. It's nice to meet you. What's your name?" And he was shocked. He was like, "That's not what I was expecting you to say." So he introduced himself. His name was Alexander, and we just started chatting just about other things, not, just having a human, decent conversation. And then eventually the conversation got back to the display, and I asked his opinions on it and just listened to him. And after he shared all of his thoughts with me, he was so struck by the fact I was actually listening with him and never interrupted him. I just wanted to understand where he was coming from. And he affirmed me in that. He said, "Hailey, thank you, first of all, for asking my name. And second of all, I recognized how you're actually listening to me and you're asking me follow-up questions. And you seem to really care what I think." He was so struck by that. And so we talked for a bit more about abortion and about what he had told me. And then he started asking me questions. "Well, you haven't told me anything, Hailey. What do you think?" So he started asking me the same questions, and he just wanted to know. He genuinely was struck by like the compassion. I was hoping he would understand I was trying to show to him, but he really wanted to know what I thought and why I disagreed with him. And then, so after quite a while of speaking about abortion, um, I noticed that he kept looking down at my necklace. I wear a miraculous medal around my neck. And never within our conversation did I mention the name of Jesus. Did I mention my faith? I have been trained to, I'm able to speak about abortion without even referencing my faith, which is awesome. I think, like Nick, you've been saying, like, we need to reach these people who perhaps they don't believe in God. Awesome. Let's come to an agreement that life is awesome and worth preserving, worth saving, regardless of religious belief. So, but he asked me, he's like, Hailey, can I ask you some questions about your faith? So for the next 2 hours, we talked about our faith. And he was atheist. So he had been born and raised Catholic. And in college decided he left the church and didn't want to be Catholic anymore. And he wanted to know why this happy Catholic girl was willing to listen to him, who he, began the conversation saying, we have nothing in common, and just assumed that I would, respond in an arrogant and, rude way as he had spoken to me. But we had this wonderful, absolutely lovely conversation. And he left saying, I'm sorry, I have to go to class. But this has been the most delightful afternoon. And it was a conversation about, differences. We disagreed in everything. But we left smiling. We shook each other's hands and said, like, let's do this again tomorrow. Like, this was great.
Yeah.
But by the end of the conversation, he told me that he changed his opinion about abortion. So
That's amazing. Yeah.
it blew my mind. Like, I had never mentioned the name of Jesus. I never mentioned my faith, but he could tell by the way I spoke to him and I listened to him that I love the Lord, and he wanted to know why. He wanted to know why I cared for him, and he was a complete stranger, and I disagreed on everything that he said. But that just struck me so much, and that was probably the most moving encounter I've had recently, if ever.
Wow, I was moved just listening to that. I mean, I think human decent conversations are in short supply these days, wherever you go. So it's awesome to hear that they exist and that they're out there and that I can find one someday. But I think that's the point of it all, right? It's just like if you're able to change someone's opinion on abortion, then you're bringing them that much closer to realizing what faith offers, in a sense, and in the same way, when you're evangelizing, you're bringing people closer to the truth about why people hold these views about abortion. And it's like, life is precious, it works both ways. And I love hearing like little stories like that, where you get to see that progression, the connection between those two things. And speaking of connection, that will be the first kind of question that I have for you guys in this next little section, which is opinions. I mean, we all have really strong opinions about everything. So I love bringing it out of people. Makes for a little the spicy part of the podcast, let's say. So I think that's the first kind of question that I have for you guys. How are these two things connected? How does the pro-life, at least in your opinion, how does being pro-life connect to faith? And should they be that connected in the first place, or should they be kind of in their own little spheres, where it's like, you treat one thing as one thing and you don't bring the other thing into the other thing, like keep them separate? Go ahead, speak on it.
Yeah, as a devout Catholic, I definitely see the connection. I don't think there can't not be a connection. That was a double negative.
Oh man, the little chat professors are rolling over.
I apologize for that. Let me rephrase. If we are truly faithfully Catholic, we believe in the way, the truth, and the life, right? That we can't not uphold the dignity of life if we truly are living out the call of our faith. But that being said, I do think there's something beautiful in those organizations that are working in complete secular spheres, and I think they're able to reach more hearts that aren't convinced that Christianity is the true faith. I've had the privilege to work with lots of secular organizations, and I've seen so many conversions of heart where we can come to the same agreement that life is precious and worth protecting, that humans are valuable, without ever mentioning the name of Jesus. So although like I do everything I do for the love of Christ, I think there is an effective way to evangelize, to spread the pro-life message, to convert hearts, by coming to the simple conclusion that human life has value. So while I think there's an obvious connection between faith and the pro-life movement, I don't think the only way to promote the pro-life movement is through the church. I think there are some wonderful other resources to reach other groups of people.
Very well said. Very well said. Nick, let's hear from you.
I agree with that. When my campus minister came up to me and asked me about starting this organization, she was like, this is more than a Catholic issue. Mm-hmm. She was like, so I don't want it to be a Catholic club. I want it to be a pro-life club. Mm-hmm. And I'll tell you, it was difficult getting started, and it's still difficult to keep going because trying to reach out to other organizations, other Christian organizations who you think would be on board with us, but when they see it as more of a political movement rather than a Christian movement, it's definitely difficult. I've reached out to the Baptist organizations on campus and everything like that, and they say, well, who are you with? Who other organizations are you with? And I mentioned I'm with the Catholic group, and then that just kind of turns them down. If the first approach to this that we have to realize is that it's more than a Catholic issue. It's more than a Baptist issue. It's a life issue. Like we're missing a third of our generation. Like we need to set our egos and prides aside to better this for our future generations, for the brothers and sisters we're missing. And, yes, we can do this with Christ and he's going to back us up no matter what. Mm-hmm. But we also need to come at this at a different way. So it's connected, but we also need to learn how to unconnect it too.
That's very well said. Very well said. I think it gets a lot of people stuck in the mud is that this is like, this is like a moral issue. It's not really like why do we need to discuss it that much? You can believe what you want to believe morally, which that's another whole situation that we have going on right now with moral relativism. And I wish we had more time to get into. Maybe I'll do something in the future. I'll bring you guys in, but unfortunately, we have to leave that tasty topic to the side. But like I said, it becomes this. The perception of it is that it's just it's just religious. It's like, why does it really matter? And I think it's 100%, like you said, Nick. Is sometimes we do need to uncouple it and bring it as its own kind of thing. This is like it's not connected to the church. It's like this is just this.
Right. It's an issue about basic human rights that can be removed from the religious category, but this is humanity, human rights issue.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Great point. All right. On to the next question. I think this is probably the one that I put the most thought into because I heard it from one of my friends once I got back from my little trip to DC for the March for Life in January with Crusaders for Life. I came back and I was discussing the trip with one of my friends. And my friend is a ministry major, so he's going into work in the church. And we were talking about it for one of our classes. And like I mentioned, we had the chance to attend the first National Pro-Life Summit, and there were a bunch of speakers there. And I mentioned a talk that I believe it was Abby Johnson, though I may be wrong. But a talk that was given that was titled "Why It's Okay to Be a Single Issue Voter." And I kind of expressed I just kind of talked about like the speech, and he was like, and I had to like, oh yeah, she was like, she was telling about, I have to vote for Republicans in the upcoming election because they're the ones that support, at least the party platform supports, with the overturning of Roe v. Wade and the, sending that issue back to the states, which politics is messy and whatever. But I mentioned it to him, and what he told me was this. He's like, I have always been pro-life. I will always be pro-life. However, I will never involve myself with the pro-life movement. And he told me that his reasoning behind it was this. He's like, I want to serve the church, but the church is made up of so many voices, and we don't like it speaks in so many different voices, and so it's like I don't know, and I'm very like I don't like I'm not sure if I would be able to minister as effectively in a parish where somebody where we're discussing this issue, and I have to disclose kind of the background that I have with it, when I was involved in pro-life organizations and like that. It taints the kind of like the perception of me as a minister, and it makes me kind of, for somebody that had those views and believes that abortion should be legal and believes in the right to choice or whatever like that. Um, it'll drive them away, and I won't be able to kind of bring the faith to them. And so like I don't want that obstacle in the way for my kind of own like for my own career. So the question behind that little story, it's a little bit of background, was this: is there anything that concerns you as a Catholic looking from the outside in about the current state of the pro-life movement? Yeah, loaded question. This was like it took me a long time to come up with this one. We'll phrase it correctly. So it's like again, like I kind of want you to take this in a way where it's like you're a Catholic who's never heard anything about like why pro-life is a right thing to do or anything. You just go to church, right? So it's like you haven't formed your opinion on this. So looking from that perspective, like what would your issues be?
I think the biggest issue is probably the church doesn't educate us well enough. A lot of my information and teachings that I've come from has been from outside the church. Students for Life is secular, so they don't align themselves with any religious organization. So a lot of my training has been secular. A lot of my training has been, this is the science and the facts and everything like that, not theology. It was only when I started looking into like Father Frank Pavone and other religious orgs that stand up for life and stuff like that to see where the church comes from. Like Jerome, I'm sure you remember Miss Beth's talks on pro-life and everything like that in January. It's like we got that, but not everyone has Miss Beth's youth group on Wednesday night. Or not everyone has a priest that's going to talk about this during the month of January during a homily. So I think the biggest issue as a Catholic is we need to educate our parishioners, our fellow Catholics, better.
Absolutely. Something that I've recently been really concerned about is talking to, as I'm growing and becoming friends with people who are getting married at this age, talking with people who are going through marriage prep and not being really taught about like natural family planning, and instead like I'm discovering that lots of young couples are going on birth control. So many Catholic women are on contraception, and who's talking about that in Catholic circles? No, I don't know. I don't know who's talking about that. And I've been hearing these examples of maybe Catholic universities or organizations or that are supporting groups like Planned Parenthood, and just that association, the church with these abortion supporting organizations, that really concerns me. And another thing as well, just I'm not sure how to word this actually. Maybe we tend to see this as just a woman's issue. And I think it's such a tragedy that men in the church, these faithful men who feel as if they don't have a voice, right? Like feel like, oh, it's just a woman's issue. So they feel they have no voice. And then that, takes away their like right to have an opinion or to say anything. But that makes me so sad, because I think especially in the church, men and women should be, hand in hand together, promoting life, learning about fertility and natural family planning, and all these things that are so beautiful in our faith. We're just not talking about them as much as we should, and especially educating the young faithful who are in the pews on Sundays, right? Like those who want to be there and want to be learning. but why aren't we talking about it more?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, very well said. Yeah, no, I think the biggest thing that I came out with was from the March for Life. Like it was, and hearing that from my friend was a little bit of a touchstone for me because I kind of had to give it like my own kind of thought. It was like, is this like in can I in good conscience keep supporting the movement? And the conclusion that I came to was the fact that the movement, although it kind of it allies itself with the groups and the political parties that will help bring this issue to like a resolution. Um, and I feel it has to be that way because otherwise you can't really get anything done. Unfortunately, of course, I think that's the way America works. Everything is a little bit politicized. Um, I think the private sector is kind of set aside as like, oh, you can do what you want, you can think what you want, but like, you know, government gets messy. It is what it is. And I took that to heart. I think it's a concern that some people might face when getting involved with the pro-life movement is that like, are people like, am I going to be able to talk about the faith as effectively if that's really like the motivation that they have, um, you know, getting into the movement, and I think the answer to that is, yeah, you're very effectively promoting the faith because you're promoting what the faith stands for, which is life. I think, yeah, I think that's y'all had some fantastic points on that question. Answered it as well as like threw y'all a curveball and y'all hit it out the park. Well done. So the next one is another little bit of a off-speed pitch. I was in my research for this episode. I was going over a few articles and stuff like that, and I stumbled upon an article from the National Catholic Reporter titled "I am a pro-choice Catholic." Of course, good clickbait title, so I clicked on it. And as I read it, I was like, of course, I would never hold this view myself, but by the end of the article, I was surprised at how like effectively she had managed to articulate a pro-choice argument through like the faith, and I was like, wow. Of course, that was impressive to me. It's like somebody could make that work somehow, but at least in you guys' opinion, do you believe that somebody can, in good conscience, be a pro-choice Catholic?
I think first, should sorry, were you about to, maybe clarify on what the person means as pro-choice, because a lot of people mean different things when they say they're pro-choice. If we mean, I support women in the workforce just as men, or I support, you know, yeah, like, but if we're meaning I support abortion,
Mhm.
I would say that abortion is in no way compatible with our Catholic faith. But if we're meaning we support women, and especially women in crisis pregnancies, and wanting to offer them as many options as possible and help them in this situation, then I want her to have all those options as well, right?
Mhm.
I love women. I am a woman. I value all
Yeah.
lives. But if we're saying we're supporting abortion, in no way is that compatible with what we believe in our faith. So if that is true, then what are we doing to assist those women? If we're saying it's not possible to be pro-choice, if I'm saying that,
Mhm.
to be in good conscience Catholic pro-choice, to me, this may be goofy, but it seems like a vegan saying I eat meat. Like, it's contradictory
You would know a few
to the
things about
principles
that,
which
I would
the faith
imagine.
upholds.
I remember Sam went very vegan. That was great. I think, yeah, I think Hailey's a little bit frozen. Nick, why don't we hear from you?
I mean, yeah, Hailey said it there. Simple answer is no. You can't be Catholic and for abortion. Like, no matter what scripture you pull, no matter what you try and argue, you can't. Like, Christ is life, and our life is our faith. And to take away a life is not a Catholic. Is not being Catholic. Is not professing the faith in any way or form. If they're arguing that, they have no right to say, or we have no right to control a woman's body or anything like that, then we bring in science, we bring in facts, we bring in, that's not your life. God blessed you with a child who has its own identity, who has its own, all these things that you just can't take away because it's a burden on you, or, all these things. My biggest thing with pro-choice is they say that their choice, but the biggest choice they offer is abortion. Why not offer all these other resources that the PRCs are offering, or that we talk about? So that the simple answer is no. That's where I stand on that.
All right, I think, and this is, I don't, it's gonna sound bad when I say it, but I want to explain what I say. I think the wording of the question is someone can in good conscience be approached as Catholic, and the key word there is conscience. I think for a singular person, if their conscience is at peace with their views, then yes. However, the argument that she uses here is that is what, like, it says that she quotes from the Catechism that says that the conscience is man's most secret core in his sanctuary. There he is alone with God, whose voice echoes in his depth. And then she references Thomas Aquinas, who said it would be better to be excommunicated than to neglect your individual conscience. However, I think that's a flawed train of thought, for the simple reason that it neglects the common good, and it neglects the objective moral truth of whether it is right, to preserve a life. And an objective moral truth in situation would always override a subjective individual conscience, because of course our consciences, like, we're not perfect. We can definitely, like, make mistakes in the things that we like, in how we think about things, and and then come to be corrected of them later. And I think it's a matter of hoping that that person isn't set in that view is like, well, I think that it's right, and so, like, there shouldn't be a problem. And hopefully that can be corrected to kind of open their eyes and see it's like, well, it's not really about you being at peace with yourself. It's about this being something else bigger than you. Mm-hmm. And it's not just your own individuality that kind of overrides this. So I think in theory, of course, in the way that this question is worded, yes, somebody can, their own good conscience, be a pro-choice Catholic. However, in general, I would definitely agree with everything that you guys are saying. That this is incompatible with the truths of the faith. Absolutely, 100%. So, all right. So that was kind of the last question that I had for you guys in the opinion section of the podcast. So let's move on to suggestions. So I think something that we've definitely touched on is that being pro-life in the Catholic sense is understood as a bigger issue than just abortion. It means fighting for the right right to life from birth to natural death. So for some people, I think a huge criticism of the pro-life movement is that it only focuses on abortion. How do we open and expand this conversation to talk about issues that maybe go beyond that?
Absolutely. I think abortion is focused on so much, because rightfully so. But
yeah, I would agree.
rightfully so. It kills so many of our most precious, most innocent members of our family every day, at the greatest scale. But how dare we forget about, people in nursing homes, people in poverty, the mothers themselves who are in crisis pregnancies, even our neighbor who is lonely and living by themselves next door. I think to be pro-life is right, an invitation to love every single person and to recognize the inherent dignity, right? So that you're absolutely, like, that applies not only to the unborn but to every single person and at every stage of development. So one of the most beautiful things I got to do in high school was go to nursing homes and play piano for my friends that I made there, and just recognize that these, like, so often we forget about our elderly. We forget about our neighbors. So I don't know. I think it's just seeing every person as this beautiful human with dignity. And yeah, there's so many other ways to live out the pro-life movement. Not only just praying outside of an abortion clinic or being part of an anti-abortion club. Like, let's go visit nursing homes. I can't think of other examples on the top of my head right now, but yeah, other areas of life other than just abortion, pro-life applies to every single stage of human life.
Very well said. Nick, what do you think?
For me, expanding this issue really begins with overturning Roe v. Wade. We live in a society where it's okay to kill the most innocent, most precious part of our world. So yeah, it's going to be easy for people to be okay for the death penalty or stuff like that because we're allowed to kill our children.
Mm-hmm.
One thing for me that I love about Students for Life, back when I went to DC, I had the wonderful opportunity of meeting Kristen Hawkins, and we went to the Trump Tower in DC and had drinks that night, and we were discussing with each other what can we do. And she said the easiest thing that we can do is prepare for when Roe v. Wade is overturned. So we need to look at the long picture because Roe v. Wade will be overturned. We just need to be ready for when it happens. Mm-hmm. We need to prepare for the next day, the day after that. Because like Hailey said, it's more than the child. It's also the mother. It's also the father. So like to expand on this issue, abortion needs to be understood fully. And then we can tackle the death penalty and euthanasia and, the old people in nursing homes like that. That's my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
I know a lot of people don't agree with that. They think that we should be focused on the old people now because they're already alive. But I think the key feature is abortion and stopping that murder from happening and then going on to fixing the other issues that we have.
I think I would agree with what you said. I think there's a progression there, right? I think we do away with the greatest evil, of course, which is Roe v. Wade. And I think that was the theme of actually the National Pro-Life Summit this year was the post-Roe v. Wade world. What does it look like? And what is our role going to be in that, in that future? I don't think it's given enough, I think it's definitely the right time to start thinking about it like that. Because we're closer than ever to having that future be a reality. And as a result, once that is overturned, we will be able to witness even more greatly to not only the dignity of life, but to our faith, which, of course, trumpets the value of life above all else. And hopefully that'll bring the Catholic Church some recognition in that sense. I love it, guys. Absolutely great answers on that. So then let's bring that out of the kind of the more general sphere of the pro-life movement and let's bring it to the church. So how do we raise awareness for the pro-life issue for the church inside of the church, in our pews and in our masses and all of that?
For me, it would be seeing it more with the priests. Like Hailey said, this is more than a woman's issue. The problem with men in this in the pro-choice field and stuff like that, and the people who are for abortion, is the fact that the men are the ones who are pushing the women to get abortions. So if we can have male-like leaders step up and do what they have to do, and that's one of the reasons I'm a part of this. I'm trying to be an example. So that I think that's one issue or how we can raise awareness of this issue in the church is seeing more come from the priest.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. and the wonderful organizations that already exist, like Knights of Columbus. For example, I was so blessed to have wonderful friends in my local Knights of Columbus group, and they are the only reason why my high school club was so successful. And um, this wonderful man sponsored our donuts every single Friday morning for our pro-life club,
What a
and
guy.
saint of a man. He is just wonderful. And um, these knights would buy my public high school club donuts, and eventually we went from like 6 members to over 200 members by the end of my senior year. We had to move from this tiny little classroom to the girls' gym to fit everyone. And this man would buy donuts every single Friday. And my public high school students had no clue this was coming from my Catholic church. But through donuts, these men were spreading the pro-life movement, and that's kind of what got so many members to come. They saw, oh, free donuts, pro-life club, I'm there. Even if they didn't agree, they'd come and listen to what I had to say, and then they'd keep coming. And that was just wonderful that I was supported by my pastor and by my Knights of Columbus group, and they bought us tickets for our local pregnancy center banquet, and they bought us 2 tables worth of tickets. So I got to bring my club to this banquet, and we were able to volunteer and just allow these students an opportunity that otherwise they would not have had. So I think if groups that already exist within the church were avidly pro-life and finding ways to support students who have clubs, just joining our work. Because I think so often we feel isolated in our mission. Like there are Students for Life of America is a wonderful national organization who help students across the country. But as a movement, we're not all united. They're a great example of what I hope the country and the world will become, like a united movement working for the same cause. But it seems like the pro-life movement is so divided right now. But I think as a church, we should be the most united in this one issue. And so it's things like, the Knights of Columbus or these groups that already are so passionate to just plug into other groups that are doing the same work and help each other, support each other, buy donuts on Friday mornings for people like me who need them.
Oh my. I'm sure that man started as like, oh, this is a nice favor I can do for Hailey, and there's like 200. Just like, oh, it just became like this like monthly expense he could write off on his taxes.
Yeah,
It's just
the donut shop
Yeah.
knew us. It was awesome. God bless.
oh, that's awesome. We definitely missed out on that opportunity. We definitely should have bought
Yeah, I'm
donuts.
saying.
Now
That's your
we
title of the podcast right there, from donuts to pro-life. Like that's
Hey.
life donuts. Oh man. Oh, the weight of the heart is through the stomach. It is 100%. No, oh, and Haley, that point is absolutely the best. The Knights of Columbus are they're such a great organization, and they are a powerful organization within the church. So when they support something, that something usually begins to move in a way that it might not have ever moved if that support didn't come from Knights of Columbus. They've provided that service to so many parishes where they kind of they have that chapter there of men that are willing to give of their time, of their talent, of their treasure, and supporting Catholic initiatives like that. And just, I mean, they're a fantastic organization. I think you hit the nail on the head. Like supporting the individuals that begin these clubs and stuff is a fantastic way for the church to kind of show that. It's just like, because then you can announce it at Sunday in the after when the announcements come up after mass. It's like, hey, donate to the Knights of Columbus to help out the pro-life club at the local high school. And people are like, well, why are we doing that? No, because the pro-life club is doing good things at that high school, right? No, oh man, that got me excited. I'm thinking about donuts now. All right, guys. Third and final question for this section. We're going to wrap it up with the podcast here is, what is your advice to somebody that wants to know about or become more involved with the pro-life movement? A little bit of a little call to action here to end off. See, whoever wants to start, you can go ahead and give us a little shout out.
I'm going to say do it. You're always going to have fears or these doubts about the movement. Just do it. Do your research, do your homework, look up videos. Ben Shapiro is an awesome debater who can help you form your arguments. Father Frank Pavone, Kristen Hawkins, all these people are amazing. So look them up and figure out what they're saying to form your arguments, because you're going to get some wild questions asked. Very wild, like crazy. Like how you're going to be like, how does that even relate? But then you have to respond to them, because if you don't respond or you don't formulate an answer, they're going to be like, well, I win. So don't be afraid, do your research, and the best way of going about doing this is find your local pregnancy center, talk to them, see what they need. If they need volunteers, volunteer there. If they need a baby drive or something like that, that's going to be the easiest stepping stone into getting into this movement. From there, once you have the backup and all these answers and research and everything done, you're going to be unstoppable. That's the easiest thing to do.
Amen to that. I think I'll just echo what you said. Be not afraid. I have never had more anxiety in my life before leading pro-life events, talks, trainings, but I've never had more peace after the fact. I seriously think that Satan hates the pro-life movement. He has come to steal, to kill, and destroy, right? And Christ has come to give life and give it in abundance. And in my experience, I am grateful I've never suffered with anxiety really in my life. But whenever I am about to walk on a stage and give a pro-life talk or lead my, club in an event, I get anxiety. And I know that the work that I'm doing is important. It matters. And that's all the more reason why I do it. Because it's hard. It is not easy at all. But it's worth it, right? So be not afraid. Anticipate difficulty. It will be hard. It is difficult. But all the more reason to do it, and to do it with joy and with love. But this is a movement of love. That's it. It's a gift of yourself to other people, and recognizing that life is beautiful. So it's worth every single struggle. But be not afraid.
Definitely.
Very well said, guys. I love it. Love it. Love it. Love it. All right. So, guys, thanks again. Thank you to Nick. Thank you to Hailey for taking time out of your day, out of your final schedules, out of your vacations, wherever you are in the world, to come on and talk about this issue with me. It's a fantastic, fantastic conversation. If you've liked what you've heard, make sure you follow the podcast on Spotify, on Anchor. You can subscribe to the YouTube channel. Make sure to like and watch the videos. I guess there's a lot more where this has come from. So thanks again for tuning in to the Catholit Podcast, and we'll see you in a couple weeks.